Right off the top of my head, Cole's Notes, very quick version. I really like this software. So I want this section to be a little bit off the cuff, a little bit stream of consciousness. I want to just kind of get this out of my head, basically. So housekeeping first, full disclosure, Dehancer did give me this software for free to review, and it was under the understanding that I was free to say whatever I wanted about it. So this is as kind of off the cuff and unbiased as I think it's going to be under these circumstances. If I didn't like this, I would absolutely say so. I don't think that I have any trouble criticizing things if I think that it's justified. I really like this software. I found it was really, really easy for me to get into. I have the free version of DaVinci Resolve, and it was really easy for me to install Dehancer. And within 5 or 10 minutes, I was in there playing with it. It's really easy to set up and get working with. The documentation is really good. I didn't actually use any of it until far later in the process because I was actually really excited to play with this. Like it's a really interesting palette of tools, and that's kind of how I started looking at it as a box full of new paints, a case full of new art supplies. So at heart, Dehancer is a series of film emulations and controls that can make your footage look like it was shot on film. Like if I was explaining it to my mom over the phone, that's what I would say. I am no cinematographer. I'm going to say that right off the hop. I did take a couple of media arts and digital technologies courses years ago in art school. And obviously, I'm a content creator, I'm a photographer. I have some familiarity with film history. So going through this, I guess I knew enough of the terminology to not have to look up what some of these effects did. If you are new to this, by all means, go through the documentation. Like I said, there's some really good documentation and there's some really good stuff available online as well. So, like a lot of you, I've got like many, many, many gigabytes of footage that I've taken for other projects to use as B-roll, just stuff I thought looked cool. And so I had a pretty wide gamut of footage that I could run through this thing. So the fact that I'm not a cinematographer and what training I had in this field was back in art school over a decade ago should kind of give you an idea of what you can expect to do with this if you just sit down and start playing with it. So right off the get-go, the thing that impressed me about this was the fact that it worked with any footage that I plugged into it. So something like this Canon G7X Mark II that I'm filming this on right now is filming in Rec 709. You don't need to know what any of this means. All you need to know is that the Dehancer works natively with pretty much anything you feed into it. Any footage that I plugged into this thing, I could make work. Some stuff I had to do a little bit more pre-production color grading and whatnot on, but by and large, I actually found that the tool set in Dehancer was usually as good or better than anything I was doing. And that could be a skill issue. Like I said, I'm not a color correction guy. I'm not a cinematographer. That is not my favorite part of this process. I would rather be writing. I would rather be actually doing projects, and putting out videos, doing the thing, rather than, spending all of my time sitting in front of, a couple of monitors here. The other thing that impressed me right away was that there was a profile in Dehancer for my Canon M50 Mark II. And I chose that camera specifically under the advice of some actual cinematographers because you can get such great footage directly out of the camera with very little post production required. And this made it even easier. I just literally scrolled down the pull down menu, clicked on my camera, and it adjusted everything to suit my camera. It was fantastic. Like the difference in the quality of the finished product after I figured that out was night and day as well. And I actually found that the presets for the Canon M50 Mark II also worked really well with the G7X Mark II. Your mileage may vary. but that's what I found. Overall, really, really happy with that. Like for me, that just slots into my workflow so easily and so nicely. And again, very easy to use, very low barrier to entry. I actually find it more difficult to edit in DaVinci than I did to do the post production stuff in Dehancer. So, like I said before, I didn't really look at any of the documentation. I did not read a manual. I just, plugged it in and started playing with it, started turning knobs and pulling levers basically. And it's a lot of fun to play with. I won't lie. I had a lot of fun the first couple days just, screwing around basically. And I think like a lot of people that have seen some of the examples on the Dehancer website and on their YouTube channel and whatnot, I just immediately went hard into like 1980s Roger Corman science fiction mode. Don't get me wrong, you can do some really, really cool kind of retro futurist stuff very, very quickly. But that's kind of at the extreme end of what this software is capable of. I'll get back to that in a bit. The list of film emulations for me, there's probably a lot of stuff here that I'm not necessarily going to use for video, but will be using for stills photography stuff. The exception being Kodak Gold. Now, Kodak Gold is my absolute favorite color film stock. I don't. It's a nostalgia thing. It just looks like summer to me. A lot of the photos that were taken of my siblings and I when we were growing up were on Kodak Gold. I still buy Kodak Gold. I just love Kodak Gold. And so I have another video project that I shot all the footage for last fall when we were camping. And the fall light, the fall colors, I was thinking at the time, my God, this looks like Kodak Gold. Like this scenery looks like it should be shot on Kodak Gold. I have used other Kodak Gold film emulators and lookup tables and whatnot in the past, and they've not worked for me. And so as soon as I saw that there was Kodak Gold in this pull down menu, I grabbed some of that footage from the camping trip, queued it up, and was just blown away. Like it looks like photos I've taken on Kodak Gold. So that one I'm really excited about. There's probably not a lot of other people out there in the world that are like, oh man, I wish I could shoot a video project on Kodak Gold. But I'm one of them, and I absolutely love it. I'm super happy about that. The other film stocks, there's obviously your traditional motion picture film stocks, which I'm probably going to use more of when I'm doing these projects. But there's enough here, and I imagine that they're going to be adding to this library as time goes on. That you'll be able to check out just about anything you like. I mean, there's a Fuji Instax emulator in here. Like, who would shoot a movie on Fuji Instax? But I mean, now you can see what that looks like. So some of the tools that I think really kind of push this ahead of the other tools that I've experimented with are the reactive film grain. So with something like Caden Live or back in school when we were using Adobe Creative Suite, film grain would be applied as a layer on top of the footage. So I would shoot something, I would color grade, I would tweak it however I needed to, and then you would apply film grain and it would basically sit on top. And that's not how film grain actually works. Like film grain is literally grains of silver compounds that have reacted to specific levels of light, right? But this software actually emulates that. So it reacts with the light in your original footage to produce the grain. It's not so much sitting on top of your footage as it is interacting with the light that your camera recorded. Exactly like film grain would, or near as damn it. This kind of reactive film grain model, it's much more organic and it looks much, much better than the old school way of doing it. The other tools, though, like I mentioned earlier, are things like Dehalation, which is just fantastic. That's such a fun effect to play with. Bloom, gate weave, like there are a lot of different things that you can play with here. You're not just controlling what film stock your footage is shot on, you're also controlling how that stock was developed and printed. which is really cool. It gives you another level of control, another creative tool at your disposal to affect the way your footage looks. The overscan effect I had a lot of fun with, and I did a bunch of footage in that. I really love 8mm film. It's kind of a nostalgic thing for me, and I think it's just a beautiful format. And so there's the overscan effect actually looks much more realistic than any of the other models that I've played with, or the phone apps, or anything like that. So I guess onto things that I'm not as fussy about, or might cause problems for other people down the road. First up, you have to remember the kind of old programming adage, which is garbage in, garbage out. There's a lot more than just film emulation and film grain and scratches that goes into this process. Like, you ultimately are still the creator, you're still in charge of these decisions. Don't go into this thinking that this is a magic wand and you're going to be able to take like any footage you've shot and just bada bing, now it looks like something Spielberg shot in 1983. That's not going to happen. There's much more that goes into this than that. If I was, again, getting back to my trashy sci-fi and horror fixation, wanting to do like a early 80s Roger Corman B science fiction horror movie, I would need to think and plan my shots, my lighting, and everything else the way they would have done it on the set back in the day. If you are going to be emulating a specific point in history or a specific look, you need to start thinking about a lot more than just the film emulation and the scratches and the halation and that kind of stuff. To give you an example of what I'm talking about, there's a movie called The Holdovers that I'm a big fan of. I absolutely love the movie. Go watch it. It's really good. But it's got one of my favorite shots in recent memory in it. It's this really cool smash zoom, like really fast zoom, remaining in focus the whole time as it zooms in on this character across kind of an open field. And they must have had a lens from the 1970s, because everything about it looked of the time. Like, even if it hadn't been shot on the correct film stock and then didn't have the right costumes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, it was enough of a signature move of that point in cinematography that it worked, and everything else was really icing on the cake. So what I'm getting at here is you are going to have to kind of think and plan shots based on what you're hoping to get out of this software at the end of the day. The Super 8 footage that I took on a smartphone, and it worked really well as Super 8 footage because it was similar enough to the way someone would have shot Super 8 footage on a Super 8 camera. You don't have a zoom lens, you've got a fixed focus, fairly wide angle field of view, and it's a little bit jerky and handheld and not great quality footage. Let's be honest. Smartphones still aren't actual cameras. I don't care what anybody says. For mimicking or emulating Super 8 or even 16mm film, that footage worked out really, really well. Another potential issue, my editing PC is older. I mean, there's still i7 processor, all kinds of RAM. I've got a good graphics card in there. It's only a couple of years old. For my needs, the kind of editing that I do, this computer is actually overkill. But I did find, when I was running a lot of effects through Dehancer, and I mean film emulation, film grain, scratches, halation, bloom, overprint, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Just stacking these things up to see what they do, it would bog down considerably. So take a good look at the system requirements if you're going to be pushing this hard. So on this channel, I tend to do more instructional DIY stuff. I'm fixing cameras and building things and that sort of stuff. Film emulation isn't really something I need, but I have a bunch of other projects that I don't put on this channel that I'm working on for other people or for another channel that I'm working on, where I'm actually finding that I'm really inspired by this software. And I'm sitting there kind of storyboarding, coming up with notes and ideas for shots that I want to do now, that I know I can get a specific effect when I'm done. I like the fact that it's inspiring me to do more stuff. That's always a good sign for me. Like, when a tool or a specific art supply or something like that, a new camera, spurs a whole bunch of creative output, that's always worth it in my mind. So overall, would I recommend this to someone like me or the people that I'm trying to speak to in my audience? Kind of hobbyists, dedicated amateurs, smaller channels. Absolutely. I think that barrier to entry here is pretty low, actually. Like DaVinci Resolve is free. This software that I'm testing right now is kind of the top tier, but there are a couple of tiers below that. And you have the option of using the software through a monthly subscription service, which means that you could play with it for a few months and see if you like it. I'm actually really excited to get to play with the online tool. I think that for a lot of people, a lot of people that are just starting out and people that want to get their feet wet in this kind of stuff, that's going to be a really good point of entry for them. So, yeah, barrier to entry is very low. Learning curve, not all that steep. It's honestly more difficult to learn how to edit than it is to learn how to use this software. At the very least, go to the website and try it out. If you go to their website, there's 40 gigabytes of video files on there you can look at. Stuff that was done by actual cinematographers and people who actually know what they're doing. And some of it's absolutely amazing. So, yeah, I would absolutely recommend that somebody in my position or hopefully yours uh, give this a try. Like, it's a lot of fun to play with. At the very least, it's a learning experience. And at absolute best, it's a really inspiring set of tools that might give you some ideas for projects you want to work on in the future. And I think that's pretty cool. I think that's worth something in of itself.